Ever been erased from the family party, only to find out their world really just had room for one? This year, the text was 8 cold words. Easter is just for your sister's family, I replied with 2. Have fun. Then I opened the gates to my $6 million Napa Vineyard for everyone else who'd been left out. As the laughter started, the calls began. Mom, Dad, and a stranger with a secret they buried for 30 years. My name is Talia Monroe. The text message arrived just before 6 a.m., vibrating against the cold quartz countertop of my Denver kitchen. The light from the screen cut through the pre-dawn gray, sharp and clinical. It was from my mother, Elaine. Easter brunch is just Celeste's family. 6 words, not, I'm sorry, not, I hope you understand. Just a statement, a locking of a door. I stared at the screen. I live my life between the sharp, thin altitude of Denver and the soft, rolling hills of Napa. But in moments like this, I am nowhere. I am simply the space outside the circle. My heart didn't spike. It did the other thing, the heavy, slow drop, like a stone sinking in cold water. This was the old loop. This was the familiar ache. This wasn't a new wound. It was the quiet, deliberate pressing on an old bruise. For 30 years, I have been the asterisk on my family's roster. I am the one who is so independent, the one who understands when logistics get complicated. Complicated, in my family's language, meant anything that drew focus away from my sister, Celeste. I thought, for a moment, about the brunch I was now uninvited to, the pastel dresses at the country club, the mimosas, the curated photograph of their perfect, tight-knit group, a group that had one less seat this year. My fingers moved before my brain caught up. I typed back 2 words. Have fun. I hit send. It was a period, a full stop, not a question mark, not an exclamation point, not an opening for negotiation. It was the end of a sentence I had stopped trying to rewrite years ago. I saw the read receipt appear immediately. No reply came. None was needed. I put the phone down. The sun was just starting to hit the Front Range, turning the mountains a sharp, unforgiving purple. The silence in my loft was enormous. I didn't call them. I didn't text again. I didn't argue. I booked a flight. 3 hours later, the air was different. It wasn't the thin, dry air of the high desert. It was the cool, damp breath of Northern California. The sound of my tires on the gravel path was the only noise, a low crunch that felt like an exhale. This was Ravenvale. This is the place I never talk about, not in interviews, not in family group chats, not to anyone who equates value with volume. This is my $6 million secret, purchased outright with the first payout from Pulse Root Systems, the company I built from algorithms and insomnia, while my parents were busy circulating press clippings of Celeste making partner track. The gravel road winds for half a mile through 200 acres of sleeping vines. The morning fog was still thick, clinging to the valleys, softening the edges of the world. This place wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about breathing. I parked the Jeep and walked, not toward the house, but toward the pergola, and there it was, my antidote to their small, exclusive celebrations. It sat under a cascade of wisteria, the buds still tight and green, a single, massive plank of black walnut. It is 12 feet long. I had it custom built, not polished to a reflective shine, but oiled, warm, showing every knot and scar in the grain. I ran my hand along the wood. It was solid, real. I'd had a mission statement when I designed it. This is the table where everyone has a spot. Their table, the one at the club, was designed to exclude. It was about reservations, dress codes, and lists. My table was designed to include. It was built to hold the weight of platters, of spilled wine, of elbows, of laughter. It was built for belonging. I stood there for a long minute, letting the cold air clear the last of the city static from my head. The resignation was gone. The ache was gone. What replaced it was not anger. It was clarity. I pulled out my phone. The screen was still empty, save for my have fun and their silent read receipt. I went to my contacts and scrolled past Elaine. I scrolled past Martin. I stopped at Aunt Nora, my mother's sister, the difficult one, the one who asked inconvenient questions at Thanksgiving, the one who got divorced twice and wasn't sorry about it, the one who, last Christmas, was told the family dinner was just immediate family, only to see photos 2 days later that included 3 of Celeste's in-laws and a business associate of my father's. She was the original forgotten one. I pressed the call button. She picked up on the second ring. "Talia? Honey, is everything okay?" Her voice was always a little smoky, like she'd just finished a good laugh or was about to start one. "Hey, Aunt Nora, what are you doing for Easter?" A pause, the familiar, careful pause of the excluded, the one where you protect yourself from the anticipated rejection. "Oh, probably just catching up on some reading, maybe a long walk. Why?" "Because I'm canceling those plans. I'm hosting brunch. Here, at my place in Napa." "Napa? Since when do you have a place in—" "Since last year," I said, cutting her off gently. "And I need you here. I'm sending a car. It's not a request. It's a summons." I heard her take a sharp breath. I could picture her, standing in her small rent-controlled apartment in Sausalito, a hand on her hip. "Talia Monroe, what are you up to?" "I'm setting a bigger table. Nora—" I didn't wait for her to argue. "The car will be there at 10 a.m. Sunday. Be ready." I hung up and immediately started making other calls. My cousin Eli, who had been disinvited from the christening because his tattoos might upset Celeste's new mother-in-law, my grandmother Ruth, who they always sat in the corner, as if she were a piece of furniture to be dusted, my old professor from Bay Ridge Tech, Dr. Aris, the one who co-signed my first business loan when my father said the idea was a nice hobby. My fingers flew across the screen. Starting a new group text, I added Nora, Eli, my Uncle Ray. I added 2 friends from San Francisco who didn't have family to go to. I added my former assistant from the Pulse Route days, the one who covered for me with a smile for 3 years straight. The message was simple. I have a table, a chef, and a lot of wine at Ravenvale. If you have ever been made to feel like you were on the edge or surplus to requirements, come here. Easter brunch. Sunday. 11 a.m. Be here. The replies were almost instantaneous. "I'm in. Send the address. Do I need to bring anything?" "Talia, this is—" "Yes. Just yes." I wasn't going to let getting there be an excuse. I called a private transport company in San Francisco. "I need a 16-seater, I told the dispatcher. "No, not a stretch limo, a shuttle, something comfortable, black or dark gray, and no logo on the side. I want it discreet." I paid for it right then, the charge hitting my account, invisible to anyone but me. This wasn't about showing off my money. This was about removing barriers. It was about making it easy for them to be seen. I finally walked into the house. It isn't a mansion. It's a sanctuary. The entire structure is cedar, and the smell of the wood hits you the moment you open the door. It smells like stability. It's one large, open room, dominated by a floor-to-ceiling fieldstone fireplace and a heavy, cast-iron wood-burning stove in the kitchen. The walls are mostly glass, looking out over the valley of vines. The furniture is all warm wood, worn leather, and soft, undyed wool. It is the absolute opposite of my parents' house, which is all pale carpets, sharp glass edges, and white velvet chairs you weren't allowed to sit on. This house was built to be used. I pulled a glass from the open shelf, just a simple, clear, heavy-bottomed glass. No gold rims, no intricate crystal cuts that distorted the light. Just honest glass, ready to be filled. This was the tone. Warm, real, unapologetic. I had one more thing to prepare, the tradition they had corrupted. Every Easter of our childhood, my mother would hide eggs, but the grand prize was always a single, glittering golden egg, and for 15 years straight, it had, by magic, always been found by Celeste, or, in later years, by Celeste's children. It was a rigged game, a small, annual coronation. I went to my desk, a simple slab of wood overlooking the valley. In one of the drawers was a box of hollow, paintable wooden eggs I'd bought for decoration and never used. I took them out, along with a can of gold spray paint from the utility closet. I spent the next hour outside in the sharp air. The psht of the spray can the only sound. I painted not one, but dozens of them. I painted until the can was empty, until the grass around me was flecked with gold. I brought them inside, the metallic smell filling the kitchen. I set them on parchment paper to dry. Then I took a stack of small, cream-colored cardstock and a fine-tipped pen. On tiny scrolls of paper, I wrote the same message, over and over, until my hand cramped. You are seen. I rolled up each tiny scroll and slipped one inside every single golden egg. There would be no grand prize at my table. There would be no single winner. Everyone was going to find the golden egg. Everyone was going to get the message. I was setting the last egg on the wide mantelpiece to dry when my phone, which I'd left on the walnut table, lit up. The phone buzzed against the walnut, too loud for the quiet house. The name glowed. Elaine. Not Mom. I'd changed it in my phone contacts 4 years ago. After she missed my university graduation ceremony because Celeste had a bad breakup that same weekend. It rang once, twice. I watched the screen. I saw her face, the one from her profile picture, smiling broadly next to my father, both of them dressed in golf attire. She wasn't calling to apologize. She wasn't calling to change her mind. She was calling because I hadn't replied with sadness or anger. I had replied with 2 words. She was calling because someone, somewhere, had told her I wasn't curled up in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. She was calling to manage the narrative. It rang a 3rd time. I looked away from the phone, out the glass wall. The fog was finally lifting, revealing the deep, impossible green of the valley. My table was waiting. My guests were coming. I pressed the silver button on the side of the phone. The ringing stopped. I didn't answer. I had preparations to make. Ravenvale's silence is a heavy, comforting blanket. But as the night deepens, the ghosts check in. They don't rattle chains. They just sit with me. The ghosts of Easter's past. The ghosts of 1,000 dinners where I was present, but unseen. To understand the text message, you have to understand the orbit. My family is a solar system, and Celeste is its sun. Elaine and Martin Monroe. My parents, at every party, every neighborhood barbecue, every church function, the introduction was a performance. My father, Martin, would puff his chest out, his voice taking on a booming, mayoral quality. Have you met our daughter, Celeste? My mother, Elaine, would glide in, her hand on Celeste's shoulder, her smile bright enough to hurt. She's our little star. Just got the lead in the summer recital. Or, just made honor roll, again. Then, almost as an afterthought, their gaze would find me, standing 2 feet behind them. Oh, and this is our other daughter, Talia, our star, and our other daughter. That was the dynamic, set in stone before I could even form memories. Celeste was the project. I was the one who was just there. From a very young age, I was praised for the one thing that required no effort from them, my silence. Talia is such a good sport. Talia is so independent. Talia just gets it. She's not needy. I became the good sport about everything. I was the good sport about Celeste getting the bigger bedroom because she needed the light for her art. I was the good sport about my soccer games being skipped because they conflicted with Celeste's piano lessons. I was the good sport about my birthdays being small. Quiet dinners because Celeste's big party the month before had tapped out the family budget. The good sport is a label they give you so they can forget you. It is the justification for neglect. It means the one who will endure. And I did. I endured. I remember Easter when I was 14. The spring chill was still in the air, but the country club dining room was overheated, smelling of lilies and baked ham. Celeste, who was 12, was in a new lavender dress. I was in a hand-me-down dress from a cousin, one that was too short in the sleeves. After the brunch buffet, my mother brought out 2 identical pastel-wrapped boxes. Just a little something, she said, beaming at Celeste. Celeste tore hers open. Inside, on a bed of white satin, was a thin 14-karat gold bracelet, a tiny sea charm dangling from it. She gasped, and my father immediately took out his camera. I opened my box. It was empty. I looked up, confused. Not hurt, not yet, just confused. My mother laughed, a light, dismissive sound. Oh, honey, not for you. You're 14. You're too old for these little trinkets. This is for Celeste. I looked at Celeste, who was already holding her wrist out for my father to photograph. I looked at the empty box in my lap. I was too old for a gift. At 14. She's already saving for a car, my father said to the table at large, as if that explained it. Talia's our practical one. I closed the empty box, and right on cue, as the heat rose in my face, my mother leaned in and whispered the family motto, the 6 words that could erase any feeling I ever had. Don't be so sensitive, Talia. That was the spell, the incantation. It was the chloroform rag held over any protest. When I built a fully autonomous drone from salvaged computer parts and a schematic I downloaded from a university server, I brought it to my father. I was 16. I had spent 3 months in the garage soldering and coding. It flew. He was watching game tape. He didn't look away from the screen. That's complex. Talia, he said, rubbing his temple. Just make sure you don't stay up too late. It's bad for your eyes. He never asked to see it fly. He never asked what it was for. A month later, Celeste won 3rd place in a local poetry slam for a poem about a sad willow tree. It was framed and hung in the hallway. The drone sat in the garage until I sold it for parts to buy my first textbooks for college. The dinner table was the real courtroom. It was where the verdict was read. Night after night, every meal was a post-mortem on Celeste's day. Tell your father about what Madame Duval said. Honey, Martin, her pliés were perfect today. Her schedule is just, we're going to have to cut back on Sundays. The extra practice is non-negotiable. My accomplishments, when I bothered to share them, were met with polite, vacant nods before the spotlight snapped back. I got the highest grade on the physics midterm. That's nice, honey. Pass the asparagus. Martin, did you remember to book Celeste's flight for the summer intensive? I learned to stop talking. I learned to eat my food, clear my plate, and go to my room. My silence was my armor, but it was the armor they had given me, and it was heavy. The final break came when I was 17. I had applied to 13 schools. I got into 12 of them, the one I wanted. The one that had the best robotics and systems engineering program in the country was Bay Ridge Tech. It was 3,000 miles away. When the thick acceptance envelope arrived, I actually felt a flicker of hope. This, they couldn't ignore. This was real. I brought the letter to the kitchen table. My mother was on the phone, scheduling Celeste's headshots. My father was paying bills. I put the acceptance letter and the scholarship offer on the table. I got in, I said. My mother put her hand over the receiver. Got in where, honey? Bay Ridge Tech, with a partial scholarship. My father picked up the letter. He scanned it. His face didn't change. He put it back down. Talia, that's all the way across the country. It's so far. It's impractical, my mother added, hanging up the phone, her attention now fully on this new problem. Just think of the travel costs, and it's so expensive, even with that scholarship. A state school would be much more logical, Martin said. We need to be practical. We still have to think about Celeste's tuition for Juilliard. There it was, my future, reduced to a line item that interfered with Celeste's. I'm going, I said. My mother's eyes hardened. Don't be difficult. Talia, we're just trying to do what's best. What's best for Celeste, I said. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. My mother picked up the letter. Well, if you're going to be this selfish about it, you'll have to figure out how to pay for it. Your father and I have other obligations. They thought that would be the end of it. They thought I would fold. They thought I would be the good sport and enroll in the local community college. 2 months later, I packed 2 suitcases, took the $2,200 I'd saved from selling that drone and a dozen other complex projects, and took a bus to the airport. They didn't come to see me off. Celeste, they said, had a recital she just couldn't miss. I went. The next 4 years were the hardest and most important of my life. I didn't just go to Bay Ridge Tech. I consumed it. I supported myself completely. I worked the early shift in the campus library, the smell of old paper and floor wax becoming my perfume. I worked the late shift cleaning lecture halls, wiping down desks at 10 o'clock at night while other students were at parties. The loneliness was a physical presence. It was a cold roommate. But in that isolation, something critical happened. During my sophomore year, in a dull logistics class, a visiting lecturer was talking about the inefficiencies in medical supply chains, how hospitals in the same city couldn't share resources, how a machine sat idle in one building while a patient died in another, 5 blocks away. Everyone else was checking their phones. I started sketching. The idea for pulse root systems wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a necessity. It was a solution to a problem that everyone else accepted as just the way things are. It was an algorithm, a way to optimize the flow, a way to see where the resources were and where they were needed in real time. That algorithm was born in the silence my parents had cultivated. It was built in the hours when no one was calling me. It was funded by the money I saved by never flying home for holidays. I learned, in that sterile, fluorescent-lit lab at 2 a.m, the most important lesson of my life. You don't need applause to exist. You don't need someone to tell you you're a star to have value. You don't need their permission to be brilliant. That seed, the idea for Ravenvale, the idea for my 12-foot table, it didn't start when I sold the company. It started when I was 14, in a stuffy dining room, holding an empty box. It was a quiet, desperate promise to a girl who was too old to be seen. One day, I would build my own table, and I would decide who had a seat. Pulse Root Systems was not born in a boardroom. It was born in a converted warehouse in West Oakland, a place that smelled like dust, old machine oil, and stale coffee. After Bay Ridge, I didn't go home. I didn't ask my parents for a single dollar. I took the last $900 from my savings and signed a lease on a 20 by 20 foot concrete box with a single grime-covered skylight. My first office was a folding card table. My servers were 3 mismatched desktop computers I'd salvaged from a university surplus sale, their plastic casings yellowed with age. I ran so much power to them that the old wiring in the walls would heat up, making the air smell like burning plastic by 3 a.m. I lived on instant ramen and the adrenaline of the chase. My main business credit card, the one I'd gotten with my library paycheck as a reference, was permanently within $50 of its limit. Every charge was a gamble. This server rack? That's groceries for 2 weeks. This software license? That's my rent. PulseRoot wasn't a glamorous concept. It wasn't a social media app. It didn't have a cute mascot. I was trying to solve a cold, hard problem: medical logistics. The system was stupid. It was archaic. Ambulances were dispatched from spreadsheets. Vital equipment, heart-lung machines, dialysis filters, ventilators, was tracked on whiteboards. I'd seen it firsthand when I volunteered at a free clinic during college. I saw a man go into cardiac arrest while a nurse frantically called 3 other hospitals, one by one, trying to find a portable defibrillator, only to find out there had been one sitting unused in the oncology wing, 2 floors down. My algorithm was designed to fix that. It was a real-time predictive routing system. It didn't just track where an asset was, it predicted where it needed to be based on incoming patient data, traffic patterns, and surgical schedules. It was designed to be the central nervous system for a hospital, connecting every moving part. But nobody wanted it. I spent 6 months pitching to every hospital administrator in the Bay Area. I got laughed out of gleaming, sterile boardrooms. "We have a system, Ms. Monroe. This is very complex. We use Excel." It sounds theoretical. My credit card was declined at a gas station. I had $112 left in my checking account. It was over. I was going to have to fold, get a job as a junior coder somewhere, and let the dream die. I was sitting on the floor of my warehouse, the sun coming up, feeling the crushing weight of failure. I had one last idea, a stupid, desperate, all-or-nothing move. I found the smallest, most underfunded public hospital in the East Bay, St. Jude's. They were perpetually on the verge of bankruptcy, running on donations and sheer goodwill. They had nothing to lose. I got the administrator, a tired-looking woman named Maria, on the phone. "Don't pay me," I said, before she could hang up. "Let me install it. 1 week. A free trial. I'll run the system in parallel with your old one. If, at the end of 7 days, it hasn't saved you measurable time, resources, and, God willing, lives, I'll uninstall it myself. No charge. You'll never hear from me again." She was quiet for a long time. "You'll do the install yourself?" "I'm already in the car," I lied. "Fine," she said. 1 week? I didn't sleep for the next 72 hours. I installed the hardware myself, running Ethernet cables along baseboards with a staple gun. I trained the dispatchers and nurses, my voice hoarse from caffeine and anxiety. For 1 week, I lived in their ambulance bay, my laptop open, watching the data. On day 3, a call came in, a 6-car pileup on the I-880, a mass casualty event. Maria's lead dispatcher, a grizzled veteran named Sal, started yelling, "We don't have the beds. We can't take more than 2 traumas." I just pointed at my screen. "You don't have to," I said. "Pulse Route is already rerouting. It's sending 2 of your ambulances to Highland, which has a free surgical suite, and 1 to Summit for the pediatric case. It's already pulled the real-time bed count. Your ER will take the 2 criticals, and the system has already flagged the O-negative blood you have in stock and cross-referenced it with the incoming patient list from the paramedics. Just trust the screen." Sal looked at me like I was insane. Then he looked at the screen, and he started reading from it. At the end of the week, Maria found me asleep on a cot in a supply closet. She held out a cup of coffee. "The board just approved a 5-year contract," she said, her eyes red-rimmed. It's not what you're worth. It's all we have." It was the first contract. It was $20,000. It felt like $20 million. That first win was all I needed. I used St. Jude's data. An 80% reduction in resource misallocation, a 50% drop in ambulance diversion rates to get a meeting at a larger hospital. That hospital became 2 became 10. Within 2 years, Pulse Route Systems was the standard for logistics in half the hospitals in California. The warehouse was gone, replaced by a sleek, boring office in an Emeryville high-rise with 70 employees. I was successful. I was solvent. I was busy. And then the world shut down. The pandemic hit, not like a wave, but like a global, systemic failure. And the one thing everyone suddenly needed was the one thing my algorithm was built to move. Ventilators, blood plasma, PPE, mobile ICU beds. My company became the central nervous system for the entire West Coast supply chain. We stopped sleeping. For 3 months, my team and I lived in that office, fueled by pizza and a terrifying sense of responsibility. The algorithm was running 24/7, redirecting truckloads of masks, rerouting mobile hospitals, load balancing the entire medical infrastructure of 3 states. I didn't have time to be scared. I just had to code. The call came at 3:30 in the morning. I was under my desk, trying to get 20 minutes of sleep. It was from a doctor at a hospital in Seattle I'd never even heard of. He was crying. I thought something had gone wrong. I thought the system had failed. "Ms. Monroe?" he choked out. Your system. It found them." "Found what, doctor? What's wrong?" "Ventilators," he said. "We were out. Completely. We had a dozen patients who weren't going to make it through the night. We were making the calls, and your system, it found a surplus, 200 units, sitting in a regional staging depot 30 miles away that we didn't even know existed. They're here. They just arrived. You Your team. You just saved us. You saved them. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt quiet. The next day, the press started calling. It was a good news story in a sea of darkness. The invisible algorithm saving lives. The woman who built the West Coast's medical lifeline. Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Wired. I was on the cover of a tech magazine. It was a terrible picture. I looked exhausted. My hair was a mess, and I was wearing the same black hoodie I'd worn for a week. I took a screenshot of the article and sent it to my family group chat. "Busy week," I wrote. "Hope you're all staying safe." I stared at the delivered notification. 5 minutes passed. Then, the 3 little dots appeared. A reply. My heart did that stupid, familiar little jump. It was from Celeste. She'd posted a picture of her new puppy, a golden doodle. "Look at Mr. Bojangles. He just completed his first obedience class. So proud." My mother replied instantly, "Oh, Celeste, he's a star. Just like his mommy. Martin, look at this. So adorable." My father replied with 3 thumbs-up emojis. My article, my work, the lives saved. It was buried under a picture of a dog. I closed the chat. I put the phone on my desk and went back to work. 6 months later, the acquisition offers started. The big players, the ones who had laughed at me in their boardrooms, now wanted to buy my theoretical system. The final offer was 9 figures. It was a number that didn't feel real. It was a number that guaranteed I would never have to worry about a credit card being declined ever again. I signed the papers in my lawyer's office on a gray Tuesday afternoon. There was no champagne, no celebratory dinner. I just signed my name, Talia Monroe, on the indicated line. I felt my lawyer's hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Talia. Do you understand what you just did?" "I think so," I said. I walked out of the building. I sat in my car for 10 minutes. I should call my parents. This was the news, right? This was the thing that would finally make them see. The thing that would finally make them proud. I dialed their number. "Talia, what a surprise," my mother said. Her voice was bright, but distracted. "Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. Is this a good time?" "Oh, it's fine, honey. We're just helping Celeste pick out paint swatches for the new nursery. It's all so exciting. What's up?" I took a breath. "I just wanted to let you know. I sold my company today." "Oh?" she said. "Sold it? Like, for good? Does that mean you're moving back home? That would be wonderful. You could help Celeste with the baby." Yeah, I sold it," I said. The number stuck in my throat. It was a good outcome." "That's nice, honey." My father's voice came on the line. "That's really great. We're just so proud right now." My heart stopped. "You are?" "Of course. Celeste just made partner track at her firm. At 31. And pregnant. She's just incredible. A real star." The line went cold. The air in my car felt thin. I was holding the winning lottery ticket, and they were telling me it was a nice hobby. "Talia, you still there?" "Yeah, Dad, I'm here." "Well, listen, honey. We have to run. This morning mist or evening dove isn't going to pick itself. We'll talk soon. We love you." The line clicked. I sat in my car as the city traffic hummed around me, and I understood. It wasn't that they didn't see my success. They couldn't see it. It didn't fit the narrative. I was the good sport. I was the practical one. I was the other daughter. I was the supporting cast. And I had just tried to claim a lead role. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their permission. And I was done trying to get it. I didn't need a seat at their table. I was free. I put the car in gear. I didn't go back to my condo. I drove to my lawyer's office. "I have another contract I need you to look at," I said, walking back in. He looked surprised. "Another one?" "A personal one," I said. "I'm buying something." I started my car again and drove north, past the bridge, past the city, past the suburbs. I drove until the concrete turned to farmland, and the farmland turned to hills. I was done with things that moved at the speed of light. I was done with algorithms and optimizing and proving my worth. I wanted something that didn't need my validation, something that didn't care about press clippings or nine-figure deals. I wanted land. I wanted time. I wanted a place to build a table. I found a real estate agent. I told her what I wanted. Something quiet. Something with roots. Something no one is paying attention to. She found it a week later, 200 acres in a forgotten corner of Napa. An old, neglected vineyard with a broken-down cedar house and a view that could break your heart. It was called Ravenvale. The contract was signed a week later. The money, the impractical result of my complex hobby, was wired. The keys were mine. Ravenvale was not a purchase. It was an act of decompression. My life had been lived at the speed of code, a relentless series of binary sprints. Here, the only clock was the sun. The only algorithm was the season. The first morning I woke up in the old cedar house. The silence was so profound it felt like a sound. I got up before dawn, the wooden floors cold beneath my feet. I made coffee on the ancient cast-iron stove and stepped outside. The hills rolled away from me in gentle, sleeping curves, not the sharp, dramatic peaks of Denver. The air was heavy with moisture, and a low silver mist settled in the valleys between the vines. It wasn't the smell of traffic or ozone. It was the smell of damp soil waking up, the smell of things growing so slowly you couldn't see it. You could only feel it. It was the smell of warm earth. This was my new respiratory rate. The house itself was a lesson in simplicity. It was built of cedar planks, silvered with age, and felt like it had grown out of the hill it rested on. The main room was dominated by a massive brick hearth that housed a wood-fired oven. Most of the back wall was gone, replaced by floor-to-ceiling glass doors that slid open, erasing the boundary between the living space and the vineyard. The house didn't try to command the landscape. It invited it in. The vines were old, neglected, and tangled. The estate agent had called them a teardown. I saw them as dormant. They had been left alone, unpruned, and unharvested for years. But their roots were deep. I felt a kinship with them. I didn't hire a massive landscaping crew. I bought a pair of shears, gloves, and a book on viticulture. I spent the first 6 months just walking. I learned the property by the hour. I learned where the sun hit at 7 a.m. and where the shadows fell at 4 p.m. The old flagstone path that led from the house to the fermentation shed was cracked and uneven. I hired a local stonemason, not to replace it, but to repair it. I had him pull up 3 specific stones. When he set them back, they bore new, chiseled words, not a corporate mission statement, but a personal one. The first stone, at the start of the path, read, "Patience." The one in the middle, "Belonging." The last one, just before the door, "Truth." I walked that path every day. It was my reminder. The small fermentation shed became my laboratory. It was a dark, cool space that smelled of yeast and old wood. I didn't try to become a master vintner overnight. I wasn't trying to build another 9-figure brand. This wasn't for the market. It was for me. Learning to make wine became a ritual. It was a practice in letting go. You can't rush fermentation. You can't optimize the grape. You can't code your way to a perfect harvest. You can only tend the soil, respect the weather, prune the dead wood, and wait. It was the opposite of everything I had ever done. It was a form of healing. I would sit in the shed for hours, tasting, testing, listening to the quiet blup-blup of the airlocks. It was the sound of transformation. I started to plant things, not for profit, but for life, on the west-facing hill. I planted a massive garden of lavender. The first year, it was just small, green shrubs. The second year, it exploded in a haze of purple. And with the lavender came the bees. At first, it was just a few. Then, it was a hum I could hear from the porch. The density of life on the property began to increase, day by day. Hawks returned to the high branches. Quail skittered through the rows of vines. Ravenvale had been quiet, but now it was alive. The silence was no longer an absence. It was a fullness. I drew up the plans for the renovation. I kept the house small, resisting every impulse to add wings or second stories, but I was obsessive about two things. The first was the ground floor room. It was the only bedroom with a view of the lavender field. It had its own door to the garden, a walk-in shower with no curb, and a fireplace that was easy to light. I chose the softest linens, a chair upholstered in warm wool, and a bookshelf I filled with history and poetry. This was Grandma Ruth's room. It was a room designed for comfort, not for show. It was a space that prioritized ease. The second obsession was the table. I'd already had the 12-foot walnut slab made. It lived under the wisteria pergola, but I had an identical one commissioned for inside, for the rainy winter nights. The designer I hired kept trying to sell me on matching chairs. A set of 12, Ms. Monroe, or perhaps 16, for symmetry? No, I told him. No sets. I spent months going to estate sales, flea markets, and artisan workshops. I bought chairs one by one, a sturdy, wide-armed captain's chair, a delicate, upholstered antique, a simple, modern wooden bench, a deep, comfortable wingback. No two were alike. Each one was chosen for its own character, its own comfort. The table is 12 feet long, I explained to the confused designer, because it needs to be long enough to hold laughter. The chairs don't match because the people won't match. Everyone should be able to find a seat that feels like it was meant for them. This was my design ethos. I did all of this in silence. My name was still attached to Pulseroot in the press. There were articles. Where is the Pulseroot founder now? Talia Monroe's next move. I never answered their calls. I deleted my social media. Ravenvale was not for public consumption. It wasn't content. It wasn't a humble brag. I posted no pictures of the sunset over the vines. I didn't announce my new passion project. I didn't show the world the label-less bottles of wine I was making for myself. I kept it quiet. I kept it safe. I needed one place on earth that wasn't performing. I did hang one thing, outside the kitchen window. From the branch of an old oak, I hung a set of wind chimes. I'd made them myself from green wine bottles I'd salvaged from the property, cutting and sanding the glass until it was smooth. When the afternoon breeze came up the valley, they would chime. It wasn't a high, tinkling, cheerful sound. It was a low, resonant, hollow sound. A clunk of glass on glass. It was the sound of something beautiful made from something broken. It sounded sad, but hopeful. One afternoon, just as the new vines were starting to show their first leaves, I took one of the golden eggs I'd prepared, the ones with the message inside. I walked to the very edge of the vineyard, to the youngest, smallest vine, one I had planted myself. I dug a small hole next to its roots. The earth was dark and rich. I held the golden egg in my palm. It was for the girl who had been given an empty box, for the girl who was told she was too old for a trinket, for the girl who had been practical and strong and had never been allowed to just be seen. For the girl who waited, I whispered. I placed the egg in the hole and covered it with soil. I knew it would decompose. I knew the paint would fade and the paper would turn to pulp. But the message would become part of the land. It would feed the roots. I stood up, wiping the dirt from my hands. I looked back at the house, at the mismatched chairs visible through the glass doors, at the smoke rising from the chimney. This was my table. This was my house. And I had a rule, a silent vow I made to myself, standing there with the smell of earth on my hands. I would open the door, I would share this place, but I would do it for the right people, at the right time. Not for performance, not for obligation, but for connection. The guest list would be my own. The silence of Ravenvale was a preparation. The text message from my mother was a starting gun. I'd spent the last year planting roots. It was time to see who would come for the harvest. My phone, which I'd ignored when Elaine called, felt different in my hand now. It was no longer a receiver for rejection. It was a tool for invitation. I'd already summoned Aunt Nora. My next call was to my cousin, Eli. Eli is 3 years older than me, a brilliant guitarist who my father once called a tragic waste of potential because he chose to teach music and work as a barista instead of going into finance. He was the family artist, which in my parents' lexicon meant the charming failure. He was consistently forgotten for formal dinners because his presence made Martin anxious about his own portfolio. He picked up on the fourth ring, his voice groggy. "Talia? It's 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Is the world ending?" "Depends on your perspective," I said. "I'm hosting Easter brunch tomorrow, at my place, in Napa." A long, suspicious silence. "Your place? In Napa? Since when? And since when do you host Easter?" I thought that was Aunt Elaine's holy sacrament. "Circumstances have changed," I said. "I'm sending a car to the city tomorrow morning. It'll pick you up at 9:30. Be in it." Whoa, hold on. A car? Tal. What is this? Is this some kind of, intervention? Are you staging your own coup? "I'm just setting a table. Eli, a bigger one. And I want you there. Bring your guitar." I heard him exhale. "Yeah," he said, the sleepiness gone from his voice. "Okay, I'll be there, guitar and all." Next, Uncle Ray, my father's younger brother. Ray had made the cardinal sin. He'd asked Martin for a loan during the 2008 recession. He was turned down, publicly, at a Thanksgiving dinner. He'd never asked for anything again, and my parents had labeled him irresponsible, effectively cutting him from all important family functions. He'd since rebuilt his life, quietly, but the label stuck. He answered with a guarded hello. "Uncle Ray, it's Talia. What are you and Aunt Clara doing for Easter?" "Talia, sweetheart, what a nice surprise. Oh, I don't know. Clara's planting some hydrangeas. Maybe we'll grill. Why?" "I'm having brunch at my home in Napa. I would be honored if you would come. I'm arranging transport from the city. It can swing by your place." He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Talia, we wouldn't want to impose. We know your parents like to keep things simple." Simple was the code word, the one Elaine used. Keeping it simple this year. It was the polite bayonet they used to trim the guest list. "This isn't their party, Uncle Ray," I said, my voice firm but warm. "This is mine, and my list isn't simple. It's full, and you're on it. 10 a.m. pickup." Well," he stammered. "Clara, get your good shoes." "Yes, sweetheart, we'll be there." My last call was to my grandmother, Ruth. She wasn't an outcast like the others, but she was a prop. At my parents' events, she was seated, smiled at, and ignored. Her stories were cut short. Her opinions were old-fashioned. She was the matriarch they kept in the attic. "Grandma, it's Talia." "Talia Bean," she said, her voice like old paper. "I was wondering if I'd hear from you. Your mother said you were busy with work." "I'm busy, but not with that. I'm in Napa, Grandma. I'm at my new house, and I'm hosting Easter. I need you at the head of the table." "Oh, Talia, your mother already has her brunch at the club. I'm supposed to go." "I know," I said, "but I have a chair for you here. It's soft, it's in the sun, and it's right next to the lavender, and everyone who is coming is someone who wants to hear your stories." Them. Another pause. "What time is the car coming?" she asked. The logistics of inclusion are the opposite of the logistics of exclusion. My parents' planning was about limits. How few people could they invite? How simple could they make it? My planning was about abundance. I called the 16-seater shuttle service back. I need to add 3 stops. Then I called the small farm stay inn down the road from Ravenvale. "I need all your rooms," I said, "for tonight and tomorrow. Yes, all 6, for my family." We had overflow. The idea of too many was a joy. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I went into the cellar and pulled cases of my own unlabeled wine, the quiet, patient kind. I brought out stacks of simple, heavy linen napkins. I walked the property and cut massive bouquets of tulips and rosemary. I went to my mismatched chairs, the collection I'd spent months curating. I ran my hand over the soft leather of one, the worn velvet of another. This was the point. I pulled the softest wool-upholstered armchair with the wide arms and placed it at the head of the 12-foot table under the wisteria. That was for Ruth. I made a small, handwritten note for my kitchen counter. Aunt Nora, brew lavender tea. Eli, check guitar tuning, needs humid air. Uncle Ray, bourbon, 2 ice cubes, on arrival. This was the work of seeing. It was the antithesis of my mother's Just Celeste text. On Sunday morning, Margaret, the local caterer I'd hired, arrived. She was a woman in her 60s with flour on her hands and the same kind of quiet, steady eyes as my grandmother. She wasn't a celebrity chef. She ran a small bakery in town, and her food was honest. She walked into my kitchen, surveyed the menu we'd planned, and looked at me. "This is a big spread for a small group, honey." "The group got bigger," I said, smiling. She looked out the glass doors at the long table, at the 30-plus mismatched glasses I'd set out, at the stacks of blankets I'd folded over the benches. "This isn't just brunch, is it?" she asked. "No," I said. "It's a correction." She nodded, understanding immediately. She tied on her apron. "Well, then," she said, her voice firm, "we'd better make sure the food tastes like forgiveness. People can't heal on an empty stomach." We worked together, the kitchen filling with the smell of roasting asparagus, honey-baked ham, and sharp cheddar from the local dairy. The decor was the opposite of the country club. No towering, stiff centerpieces. I just laid the tulips and rosemary down the center of the bare walnut table. At each place setting, I put a simple, undyed linen napkin, and on top of each, a single, hand-painted pastel egg I'd made, with a name written in gold ink: Nora, Eli, Ray, Clara, Ruth. And next to that, I placed one of the golden eggs. At 10:45, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel. The string trio I'd hired, 3 students from the conservatory in the city, had already set up on the grass. As I'd requested, they began to play a soft, gentle waltz. The 16-seater bus, black and unmarked, pulled up the drive. The door hissed open. Aunt Nora stepped out first, wearing a bright red dress, looking defiant and curious. Then Uncle Ray and Aunt Clara, looking nervous, as if they were crashing. Then Eli, guitar case in hand, blinking in the bright sun. Then others, my old professor, my 2 friends from the city, Dr. Aris, my assistant from Pulse Route, with her husband. One by one, they stepped out onto the gravel path, a collection of mismatched, wonderful people, the difficult ones, the impractical ones, the irresponsible ones, the forgotten ones. Grandma Ruth arrived last, in Eli's beat-up sedan. He'd gone to get her himself. I walked over and opened her door. She looked at the house, at the wisteria, at the table, at the people mingling on the lawn. She looked at me. "Talia Bean," she whispered, her eyes full. "What have you done?" "I built a bigger table, Grandma." I walked her to her chair at the head of it all. I stood on the stone steps as everyone found a glass of wine, as they looked at the view, as they slowly began to exhale. The tension of anticipated rejection was melting off them. I didn't tap a glass. I didn't make a speech. I just waited until the murmur of conversation quieted, and I said the only 4 words that mattered. "Thanks for coming." That was it. That was the whole sermon. We sat. The meal was loud, and then quiet, and then loud again. Uncle Ray told a long, rambling story that my father would have cut off in 30 seconds. Everyone listened to the end, and then laughed. Eli and Dr. Aris got into a deep, nerdy debate about physics. Aunt Nora picked up the golden egg at her place setting. "All right, Talia," she said, her voice carrying across the table. "What's this? Am I the chosen one, like Celeste?" The table went quiet. The old wound was right there, sitting in the open. "We all are, Nora," I said. "Open it." She fumbled with the wooden egg, twisting it. It popped open. The small, rolled-up scroll of paper fell onto her plate. She unrolled it. She stared at it. "What's it say, Mom?" Eli asked. Aunt Nora looked up, and her eyes were shining. She didn't say anything. She just handed the small paper to Eli. Eli read it. His breath hitched. He looked at me, a look of such profound, shocked understanding that my own throat tightened. "It says," Eli said, his voice thick, "it says, you are seen." A silence fell over the table, a deep, profound, restorative silence. I watched as, one by one, they all opened their golden eggs. Uncle Ray, Clara, my old assistant, Grandma Ruth. The same message, for every one of them. And that's when the tears started. Not sad tears, tears of release. Aunt Clara covering her mouth, Uncle Ray taking off his glasses to wipe his eyes, pretending to be clearing a smudge. Grandma Ruth reached her hand across the table and placed it on mine. She didn't say a word. She just squeezed. Then Eli, after a long moment, picked up his guitar. He didn't play a waltz. He played a soft, bluesy riff, a chord progression that felt like walking home. And the laughter came back. It was different. Now, it was louder. It was unburdened. There was no hierarchy at this table. There was no star and other daughter. No one was performing. No one was comparing. We were just there. We were all seen. An hour later, full of food and wine and that new strange lightness, I stood up. "Everyone," I said, "I need a picture." We crowded together. I didn't ask them to pose. I just held up my phone. Aunt Nora was laughing. Her arms slung around Eli. Uncle Ray had his hand on Grandma Ruth's shoulder. The string trio had put down their bows and were holding glasses of wine. Margaret the caterer was in the back, waving, her apron still on. I captured it, the real, chaotic, beautiful moment. I looked at the photo. It was perfect. I opened my phone. I went to the family group chat, the one that still had my unanswered article and Celeste's puppy picture in it. I attached the photo, and I wrote one simple caption. "Easter at Ravenvale, the best one." I hit send. After the photo was sent, a strange collective exhale seemed to settle over the group. The big, unsaid thing had been done. The picture was out. We had declared ourselves. The tension that had been humming underneath the laughter was gone. What remained was light. "All right," I said, clapping my hands together, the sound sharp and clear in the valley air. The meal was just the appetizer. It's time for the hunt. A few of the adults, Uncle Ray, Dr. Aris, looked at me, amused. "An egg hunt? Talia, I think we're a bit past that," Uncle Ray said, patting his full stomach. "Not this one," I said. "This one's weighted, and I've been hiding eggs for 2 days. Also," I pointed to the rows of vines, "I'm the only one who knows where the poison oak is. So, participation is mandatory for your safety." That got a laugh. Eli's daughter, Mia, who was 7, was practically vibrating with excitement. I divided the vineyard into 3 zones, I announced, feeling like a general of a joyful army. Zone 1, by the lavender field, is for ages 10 and under, easy grabs. Zone 2, up through the first 8 rows of vines, is for the teenagers. My assistant's 2 shy sons, who had been glued to their phones, actually looked up, intrigued. "Zone 3, I said, looking directly at Aunt Nora and Uncle Ray, "is for everyone else. And I'll warn you, I'm competitive. I hid yours well." I gave Mia a small wicker basket. "Go." She shrieked with joy and sprinted toward the lavender, her bright yellow dress a blur against the purple. The teenagers followed, feigning boredom, but their pace quickened as they got further from the table. "Come on," Eli said, nudging Uncle Ray. "Last one to find an egg buys the next bottle. Oh wait, Talia owns all the bottles." "Then you'd better be fast," I smiled. The adults fanned out, their laughter echoing as they moved through the vines. It was absurd. It was middle-aged people, professors, and guitar teachers, peering under leaves and behind wine barrels, all of them, for a moment, completely unburdened. I didn't join the hunt. I stayed at the table with Grandma Ruth. She was too frail to navigate the uneven ground. I poured her a small glass of water. She sat in her soft, upholstered chair, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't watching the hunt. She was just listening. Her eyes were closed, and a small, private smile played on her lips. She was soaking in the sound of her family, unfiltered and happy. Every time a shout went up, "Found one! This one's blue!" she would open her eyes, clap her frail hands together twice, and give a little, satisfied nod. Her smile was one of pure, unadulterated contentment. She wasn't just watching a party, she was witnessing a restoration. Eli had retrieved his guitar. He didn't go hunt. He sat on the steps of the house, his back against the cedar, and began to play. He played old folk songs, the kind of music that feels like it's already in your bones. He played with a lightness I hadn't heard in his music in years. It wasn't the cynical, smoky bar blues I associated with him. It was open. It was bright. As the adults came back, one by one, placing their pastel and gold eggs on the table like trophies, he started to sing. He has a rough, honest voice. He looked over at Grandma Ruth, and then at me. He sang a line I didn't recognize, one that sounded like he'd just written it. "We're all still here," he sang, his thumb thumping the bass string. "We're all still home." Aunt Nora, her hair coming undone, her hands smudged with dirt from digging under a rose bush, sat down at the table and joined in, her voice a surprisingly clear harmony. "We're all still here." Just as they held the note, a sudden, strong gust of wind came up the valley. It was the 4 o'clock wind, as I'd come to call it. It rushed through the wisteria, and the pergola erupted in a sudden snowstorm of purple petals. The air was thick with them. They rained down on the table, into our hair, onto the grass. It was a moment of pure, unplanned magic. Everyone stopped. Eli's guitar cord hung in the air. We were all frozen, looking up, laughing as the petals swirled around us. I grabbed my phone. It wasn't to stage a picture. It was to capture a moment that was already perfect. I snapped the photo. It was a golden hour miracle. The light was liquid, catching the dust motes and the purple petals in midair. Aunt Nora was looking up, her mouth open in a laugh. Uncle Ray was shielding Grandma Ruth, both of them smiling. Eli was just watching us, his hand on the neck of his guitar. I thought, this is the one I'll frame. My phone buzzed in my hand. Not a call, a text message. It was from the new group, the one I'd created that morning. The Ravenvale Easter. It was Aunt Nora. I can't remember the last time I laughed this hard. Then Uncle Ray. "Thank you, Talia. Thank you." Then my old assistant. "My boys are actually talking, not texting, talking. This place is magic." Then Eli. "Wish we did this 20 years ago." The replies came one after another, a cascade of gratitude. No one mentioned the other group chat. No one mentioned the photo I'd sent to Elaine and Martin. We didn't need their response to validate our joy. Their silence was irrelevant. We were too busy being loud. I didn't find the big one. Mia, Nora's daughter, came running back to the table, her basket mostly empty, her face a mask of tragic, 7-year-old disappointment. I looked everywhere. "Oh?" I said, feigning surprise. "The big one? I wonder where that could be." I looked at Aunt Nora, who looked at Eli, who looked at me. "You know, Mia," Eli said, putting his guitar down. "Sometimes the treasure isn't where you're supposed to look. Sometimes it's right where you started." Mia's face scrunched in thought. She looked around the lawn, then her eyes landed on the house. She ran to the big empty wine barrel I used as a stand by the front door. Tucked just inside the rim, so obvious that everyone had missed it, was a single, enormous golden egg. It was twice the size of all the others. "I got it!" she screamed, holding it above her head like the world's tiniest champion. "Bring it here, honey," Aunt Nora said, her voice full of pride. Mia ran to the table and presented the egg to Grandma Ruth, who helped her twist it open. Inside wasn't a tiny scroll. It was a larger piece of cream-colored cardstock, folded carefully. "You read it, Grandma," Mia said. Grandma Ruth unfolded the paper. She held it up to the light, her hand trembling slightly. She read the words I had written the night before. "Your place at this table?" she began, her voice cracking. She paused, taking a sharp breath. She looked at me, her eyes brimming. "Go on, Ruth," Uncle Ray said softly. She cleared her throat and read the rest, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Your place at this table is permanent." Aunt Nora put her face in her hands. Uncle Ray stared at the wood grain of the table. And I felt it, a physical sensation, deep in my chest, a knot that I had been carrying for 30 years, a tight, cold ball of rejection and striving and proving. It didn't just loosen, it dissolved. It simply came undone. I was no longer the girl with the empty box. I was the woman who owned the table. The party didn't end, it just softened. As the sun began to dip behind the western hills, the air grew cooler. People grabbed the blankets I'd left out, wrapping them around their shoulders. Margaret, the caterer, had left the big brick oven on, and the warmth pulsed from the kitchen. The last of the ham was gone. The strawberry jam jar, the one Margaret had made from scratch, was scraped clean. It was the sign of a real meal, not a polite performance. It was food that had been enjoyed, not just photographed. The sun went down, the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. The shadows of the vines grew long, stretching across the lawn, merging with our own. We sat in the twilight, the string trio softly playing, Eli's guitar now silent. The shadows were long, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was one of them. I wasn't the unseen edge of someone else's light. We were all there, together, bathed in the same soft, fading glow. We weren't lonely. We were just quiet. I smiled, leaning my head back, soaking in the last moment of peace. And then, on the table, my phone lit up. The screen glowed, harsh and white in the twilight. It vibrated against the walnut, the sound a violation of the quiet. I didn't need to read the name. I knew who it was. The calls had begun. The peace of the twilight was a fragile thing. The purple sky, the quiet hum of the departing shuttle, the scent of wisteria and cooling earth. It was a perfect sealed moment. Then the vibration started, a harsh buzz against the walnut. Elaine. The name glowed on the screen. Grandma Ruth, sitting beside me, put her hand on my arm. "You don't have to, you know," she said softly. "I know," I said, "but I think it's time." I stood up, leaving the table of cleared plates and empty wine glasses. I walked past the pergola, down the stone path, toward the silence of the vines. I pressed accept and held the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello, I just waited. For a second, there was only a sharp, angry static. Then her voice, high and tight, a wire drawn thin. "Talia, what have you done?" It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "I had a brunch, Mom." A brunch? You posted that picture. You did this to embarrass us. Talia, you made us a laughingstock. Do you have any idea the calls we are getting? The texts? Everyone thinking that we excluded you? Thinking? The word hung in the cold air. "You did exclude me," I said. My voice was calm. It was so calm it scared me. It was the voice I used to use in boardrooms, the one that meant I had all the data. "You sent me a text. Just Celeste's family. Those were your words." That was a simplification. We were trying to have a quiet day, and you turn it into this spectacle, this enormous show-off party at your ridiculous vineyard. You invited Nora. You invited Ray. You paraded your money around just to make your father and me look small. My money didn't make you look small, Mom. Your guest list did. There was a sharp inhale. "You ungrateful." "Elaine, give me the phone." My father's voice, Martin, the sound of forced, paternal reason, the sound of a gavel. "Talia," he said, his voice a low rumble of disappointment. "This was a serious error in judgment. A serious one. You do not handle family matters publicly. You do not air our laundry. If you had a problem with the arrangements, you were to come to us, privately. You ask before you do something this divisive. You must have known how this would look. I knew exactly how it would look, I said. It would look like a table with room for everyone. That is not your decision to make, he boomed. I am the head of this family. I decide what is appropriate. You went around us. You created a mutiny. You owe your mother and me an apology, a public one. For what? For feeding our family? For inviting Aunt Nora and Uncle Ray? For giving Grandma a seat at the head of the table where she wasn't ignored? He was sputtering. He was a man who was used to his monologues ending in applause, not rebuttal. You are out of control, Talia. No, Dad, I said, looking out at the dark, orderly rows of my vines. For the first time in my life, I am completely in control. I hung up. I stood there, my hand shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline. The silence of the vineyard rushed back in. It was done. I had said it. My phone buzzed again, a different number. I didn't recognize it, but the caller ID read, Pastor Caldwell, the pastor of our family's church, the one my mother co-chaired every committee with. I let it ring 3 times, took a breath, and answered. Talia Monroe, this is Reverend Caldwell. His voice was unctuous, a smooth, practiced baritone of concern. Reverend. Talia, I'm calling with a heavy heart, a heavy heart. Your parents are pillars of our community, and this is Easter Sunday, a day for unity, for family, and I'm seeing this photograph, and hearing reports of a rival event. My dear, in times of disagreement, our task is not to create more division, it is not to break the flock. The Lord's table is one of unity. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. Reverend, I said, my voice sharp, are you calling to talk about division? Or are you calling to talk about a habit of exclusion? Because my parents' table has been shrinking for 30 years, is the Lord's table also just for Celeste's family this year? I didn't create the division. Reverend, I just set a table for the people who were already divided from... Tell me, is that a sin? He was silent. The practiced, smooth voice was gone. I think you are misinterpreting, he stammered. I am simply counseling peace. Peace and quiet are 2 different things. Reverend, I have to go. I hung up again, 2 and 2. My phone immediately lit up with a text, then another, then a call from a number I really didn't recognize, a local area code. I answered, wary. Hello? Yes, is this Talia Monroe? My name is Cynthia Davies. I'm from the town clerk's office. The voice was nervous, official. Yes, how can I help you? Well, ma'am, this is a bit unusual, but we're seeing a lot of chatter. That picture from your brunch today, at Ravenvale? It's all over the local community pages. It's just beautiful, what you did, bringing all those people together. Thank you, I said, confused. What's this about? It's just, your mother, Elaine Monroe, she manages the church's Easter fund, for the community brunch, the one the town co-sponsors. My blood went cold. I'm not aware of it. Oh, it's just... The fund application she filed with us cited a minimal guest list this year due to lack of family interest. The funds were allocated for a very small event, and now everyone is seeing your party. And, people are just wondering where the community brunch was and where that Easter fund money went. I'm just trying to get ahead of the calls we're going to get tomorrow. I felt the ground shift. This wasn't just exclusion. This was something else. This was finance. Cynthia, I said, I can't help you with that. I had no part in that event. My brunch was privately funded. You'll have to speak to my mother. Of course, ma'am. Thank you. She hung up. I stared at my phone. A text notification was waiting. It was from Eli. It wasn't words. It was an audio file. Voice memo, M4A. Underneath it, a message from him. Tal, my cousin Sarah just sent this to me. It's from her mother-in-law. You need to hear this. I pressed play. The sound was muffled, like a phone in a pocket, with the clinking of glasses in the background. It was a woman's voice, one I vaguely recognized from Christmases past. No, I know. But Elaine called me herself. She said it was just a strange thing. She said Talia was going through something, and to just let her be, not to encourage it. She said, don't go to Talia's thing. It just looks strange. So we didn't. I mean, you don't want to get in the middle of that, do you? We just sent Celeste's kids a card. I stopped the recording. It wasn't passive. It wasn't an oversight. It was a campaign. My mother had actively lobbied against my brunch. She had told people not to come. My phone rang again. Celeste. I almost declined it, but I was so numb, I just pressed accept. Silence. Then, the sound of keys jangling, the thump of a bag being set down, a car door slamming. It was a butt dial. I was about to hang up when I heard her voice, muffled but clear. She was talking to someone. I mean, I don't know why I'm the one getting angry texts. It's not my fault. Mom told me to just let her have her little drama, that she'd get bored and it would blow over. How was I supposed to know she'd invite, all the family rejects and then post it online? It's so cringe. Let her have her little drama. She'll get bored. Cringe. I ended the call. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, in the dark, as the wind chimes from the house played their low, hollow, hopeful song. I walked back to the table. The caterers were gone. The guests were gone. Only Grandma Ruth remained, a blanket over her knees, Eli standing beside her, waiting. She looked up at me. Her eyes, in the dim light from the house, were clear and sharp. She knew. She had seen the procession of calls. They used to call it keeping it simple, she said, her voice quiet but strong. That was always Elaine's phrase. We're simplifying. I've been watching her simplify this family for 30 years. She simplifies people right out of the room. She sighed, a long, weary sound. They don't use simplify because it's easier. They use it because it gives them control. It's a way to shrink their hearts, Talia, and make it look like a virtue. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from a number I knew well. Mr. Parker, my family's attorney, the one who had handled my parents' wills, and my grandfather's. Talia, I hope this finds you well. I must insist we schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience. It's regarding the administration of your grandmother's trust, and certain stipulations in your grandfather's will that have come to my attention. Please call my office in the morning. It was all connected. The money, the brunch, the will. He's dead, isn't he? Ruth said, not a question. Who, Grandma? Your grandfather, Martin's father. He's been dead for 20 years, but your father and mother have been trying to kill his legacy since the day he was buried. They hate it. Hate what? She reached down beside her chair and lifted a small, dark wooden box. It was old, with a tarnished brass clasp. She held it out to me. This, she said, your grandfather, William, he gave this to me before he passed. He said, Ruth, give this to Talia, not Celeste, Talia. Give it to her when she's old enough to understand what it costs to build a table instead of a wall. She looked at me. I think it's time. I took the box. It was heavy. I opened the clasp. Inside, there weren't jewels. There were 3 plastic-cased cassette tapes, labeled in my grandfather's shaky handwriting, Easter 1994, Easter 1996, Easter 1998. And under them, a single, folded letter on his old cream-colored letterhead. I unfolded it. My dearest Talia. By the time you read this, I will be long gone, and you will be a woman grown. I am writing this because I see you. The others see a quiet girl. I see a listener. I see a builder. And I am worried about what my son is teaching you. He has forgotten. Our family, the Monroes, we were not always simple. After the war, My father's family was shattered. Brothers didn't speak. Sisters were on opposite sides. We were broke and we were broken. On Easter, 1946, my father took the last of his money, bought the biggest, ugliest table he could find, and put it in the yard. He said, "Everyone has a seat, no matter what. You come, you eat. You don't have to talk, but you have to sit at the table." That table saved us. It was a tradition. Not a party, a tradition. It is a mandate. Your father has a love of appearances. He and Elaine, they want to cut off the parts of the family that don't look good in their photograph. They want a small, clean, perfect life, but life is not clean. Talia, it is messy, and family is the messiest part. You cannot cut off family for pride. You cannot shrink the table because it's easier. It is your duty to add a leaf. It is your job to find another chair. This is your inheritance, not the money. This, the mandate. Don't let my son and his wife simplify this family into nothing. Don't let them hold the table. Your loving grandfather, William Monroe. I closed the letter. My hands were perfectly steady. The adrenaline was gone. The hurt was gone. What was left was cold, hard, and clear. It wasn't a drama. It wasn't a cringe party. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a mandate. I turned to Grandma Ruth. "Eli, can you take her home? I have one more thing to do." I walked inside, to my desk. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Elaine. I didn't call Martin. I opened a new text message. I added only 3 people: Elaine, Martin, Celeste. I typed 8 words. "Friday night, my house, dinner for 4. If you want to listen, be here." I hit send. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. The 5 days between the brunch and the summons were a different kind of battle. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, replaced by the cold, methodical hum of my work. My parents had been given my summons. Now, I had to prepare the evidence. My first call on Monday morning was not to my family. It was to Mr. Parker, the family attorney. "Mr. Parker, it's Talia Monroe. You texted me last night regarding my grandmother's trust." His voice was dry, all business. "Talia, yes, I'm glad you called. As you know, I handled the estate for your grandmother, and I was the junior partner who filed the codicils for your grandfather's will 25 years ago." "I know," I said. "Grandma Ruth gave me a letter from him last night. It mentioned a mandate, to hold the table." Parker was silent for a beat. "A letter? Yes, that sounds like William. He was a very specific man. Talia, what I am about to tell you is delicate. Your grandmother, Ruth, is the beneficiary of the trust, but your mother, Elaine, is the administrator. And your grandfather's will contains a very specific codicil regarding the Monroe Family Unity Trust." He was insistent. "What did it say?" "It stipulated that the trust funds, which are not insignificant, their dividends from his original holdings, are to be used for one purpose: funding the annual Easter gathering to ensure all descendants of his line could attend, travel expenses paid, to hold the table, as you said. It explicitly forbids the administrator from excluding any branch of the family for personal or superficial reasons." My hand tightened on the phone. "Mr. Parker, I need to see the financials for that trust for the last 15 years. "Talia, I can't just... Your mother is the administrator. That's a breach of..." "Mr. Parker?" I interrupted, my voice flat. "My grandmother, Ruth Monroe, the primary beneficiary, gave me her full verbal power of attorney last night. She is sitting right here. She will tell you herself. She is authorizing a full audit. Please send the documents." I handed the phone to Grandma Ruth. I heard her voice, clear and firm, with none of the fragility she usually feigned for my mother. "Do it, Howard. Send my granddaughter every single page. It's time." I took the phone back. "The documents, Mr. Parker, today." "They'll be in your inbox in an hour," he said. The dryness was gone. He sounded almost relieved. An hour later, my laptop screen was glowing. This was my world, Data, spreadsheets, columns and rows. This was the work I understood. I pulled the trust's bank statements, and there it was, a story told in numbers. For 15 years, regular deposits from the dividends, and every year, a withdrawal in late March or early April, coded Easter gathering. 10 years ago, the withdrawal was for $15,000. The memo line read, Catering and Rental, Community Hall. 9 years ago, $8,000. Memo, Private Dining, Hillside Country Club. 7 years ago, $5,000. Memo, Brunch, Hillside. This year, $2,500. Memo, Elaine Monroe, Easter Fund. The fund wasn't just for the brunch. The brunch was an excuse to access the fund. She had shrunk the party, cut the guest list, cited lack of interest to the town clerk, and then pocketed the difference. The simplification was profitable. She had been systematically excluding the family, Aunt Nora, Uncle Ray, me, and using our absence as a justification to downsize the event, all while paying herself from the trust fund my grandfather had set up to prevent exactly that. I leaned back, the blood pounding in my head. This wasn't just petty jealousy. It wasn't just about Celeste. This was a calculated, long-term, financial deception. My phone chimed. An email, not from Parker. It was from Reverend Caldwell. Dear Talia, after our brief conversation, I felt it was my duty to review the church's position. I must confess, I have for too long relied on tradition, or rather, your mother's version of it, instead of asking the harder questions about who was not present at the table. Your event on Sunday was a powerful reminder that our community is larger than our habits. I have spoken to the church board. We will be conducting a full, transparent review of the Community Easter Fund and its administration. We will be in touch with your mother directly. I pray for peace for your family in this. He was distancing himself. He was covering his tracks. He was confirming, in his careful pastoral way, that my mother was in serious trouble. I saved the email as a PDF, Exhibit A. Then, Eli texted, a screenshot. It was from a different family group chat, one for Celeste's generation of cousins. The text was from my mother, Elaine, sent 2 months ago. Just a friendly reminder for planning. The official family Easter will be just Celeste, her husband, and the children at the club this year. We're keeping it simple and quiet. We'll plan a big post-Easter potluck for all the others sometime in late May. So much easier for everyone. The others. We weren't just forgotten. We were a different class of citizen. We were the ones you scheduled for a potluck in May. I closed the laptop. The financial and legal case was airtight. But I wasn't a prosecutor. I was a daughter. And this still felt incomplete. I looked at the wooden box Grandma Ruth had given me. The cassette tapes. I spent an hour digging through my old college boxes in the attic of the Ravenvale guest house. I finally found it. A dusty portable cassette player from my dorm room, the kind I used to make mixtapes on. I brought it down to the kitchen, sat at my own simple, honest table, and pressed play on the first tape, Easter, 1994. The sound was tinny, full of hiss and the muffled clatter of silverware. I heard my father's laugh, louder than everyone else's. I heard Celeste, her voice high, complaining about the color of her dress. And then I heard it, the moment I had relived in my head 1,000 times. My mother's voice, bright and patronizing. Oh, honey, not for you. You're too old for these little trinkets. This is for Celeste. A pause. Then, my own voice, 14 years old, high, thin, and carefully controlled. That's okay. I'm fine. I don't need one. I'm fine. Then Elaine, her voice moving away, speaking to someone at the table. See? She's fine. Talia is so strong. She just gets it. She's my strong one. I stopped the tape. I hit rewind. I played it again. She's my strong one. It wasn't a compliment. It was a cage. It was the label they'd given me. The one that meant, this one doesn't need care. This one doesn't need acknowledgement. This one can be neglected, and she will call it strength. I was the good sport, who could take the hit. I took out the tape and put in the next one, Easter 1996. This one was quieter. It sounded like it was recorded in a study. It was my grandfather, William. His voice was rough, but the mandate from the letter was alive in it. And I told your father, Martin. I said, you don't get it. After the war, my brother Paul and I, we didn't speak for 2 years. 2 years, over nothing, pride, my father. Your great-grandfather, he knew it. He knew that families are like gardens. If you don't actively work them, they die. The weeds take over, and pride is the worst weed. He coughed, a dry, papery sound. This table, this Easter mandate, it wasn't about a party. It was about work. It was the one day a year he forced us to be in the same room. He forced us to look each other in the eye. He said, you don't have to like each other today, but you have to be family today. That table saved us. It forced us to be bigger than our stupid pride. Your father, he thinks the table is for showing off. He thinks it's for presentation. He's forgotten that the table is for salvation. The tape clicked off. I sat in the silence of my kitchen. The setting sun cast long shadows across the floor. I had the timeline. I had the motive. I had the financial records. I had the personal testimony. My grandfather's will. My mother's systematic, profitable dismantling of it. My father's complicity, trading his father's legacy for his wife's simple life. Celeste's role as the star who needed the exclusion to feel special, and my role as the strong one who was built to endure it. I looked at the pile of evidence, the bank statements, the pastor's letter, the leaked text message. I could burn their world to the ground. I could send this to the church board. I could send this to the town clerk. I could send this to every other in the family. I could have Mr. Parker freeze the trust and sue my mother for mismanagement and fraud. I could win. But I heard my grandfather's voice on the tape. The table is for salvation. He didn't say win. He didn't say punish. He said, hold the table. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father, Martin. Their first reply to my summons from Sunday night. We received your text. This is highly inappropriate. We will not be ambushed by you. Talia, whatever evidence you think you have, this is not the way. I looked at his message. I looked at the evidence. I thought about the 14-year-old girl saying, I'm fine. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't trying to ambush them. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to end the pattern. I was trying to change the way the table was set. This was the only way. Not with an audience, not with Aunt Nora and Eli there for backup. That would just be another performance, another division. It had to be just the 4 of us, the nucleus. I typed my reply. It is not an ambush. It is a choice. You can come here on Friday and hear the truth from me, or you can hear it from Mr. Parker, the town clerk, and the church board on Monday. Your call. I sent it. I closed the laptop. The evidence was sufficient. The case was built. The decision was no longer mine to make. It was theirs. The house was quiet. I waited. An hour passed. The sun was completely gone. My phone lit up. A text from my father. 7 p.m. Friday evening, the sun had just touched the western ridge, setting the sky on fire, bathing the valley in a deep, judgmental gold. I heard their car long before I saw it, the sound of an unfamiliar engine, a luxury sedan, driving too fast on the gravel. They didn't park by the house. They stopped 20 yards away, as if they were afraid to get too close. They got out, one by one. Martin, Elaine, Celeste. They looked like a delegation. They stood for a moment, looking at the cedar house, the rows of vines, the dark, massive shape of the 12-foot table under the wisteria. This was my land. They were intruders here, and they knew it. I didn't go out to greet them. I just opened the front door and waited. They walked slowly up the path. Elaine was wearing a stiff, cream-colored blazer, armor. Martin had his hands in his pockets, his shoulders set. Celeste looked at the ground, her hair covering her face. No one spoke. I stepped back and held the door open. "Come in?" I didn't lead them to the great room. I led them to the small kitchen alcove, by the brick hearth. There, I had set a small, round, 4-person table. Not the grand, symbolic walnut slab. A small, simple, oak table. There was no escape from it. You could not be overlooked at a table this small. I had made a simple roast chicken with lemon and thyme. There was a loaf of sourdough bread from Margaret's bakery. 4 plates, 4 glasses of water. On the table, a single, low beeswax candle burned. Its light small and steady. This was not a celebration. It was not a performance. It was an examination. They sat. The mismatched chairs I had collected looked foreign and accusing under them. Martin, in a stiff-backed Windsor. Elaine, perched on the edge of a simple shaker chair. Celeste, sinking into the upholstered one. The silence was suffocating. It was filled with everything unsaid for 30 years. My father cleared his throat. "Talia, this is not—" "I'll serve," I said, cutting him off. I went to the stove, my back to them. I could feel their eyes on me. I carved the chicken. I put a piece on each plate. I brought them to the table, one by one. I sat down in the 4th chair. The candle flame was the only thing that moved. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at my sister. "I'm going to tell you 3 things that happened to me," I said. My voice was low, and it did not tremble. "You're going to listen. When I'm done, we can talk. But first, you will listen." No one moved. "First," I said, "I am 14 years old. It's Easter at the club. Mom, you hand out 2 boxes. One is for Celeste. It has a gold bracelet. The one you hand to me is empty. When I look confused, you laugh, and you tell me I'm too old for trinkets. Then you lean in and tell me not to be sensitive." I looked at Elaine. Her hand, resting on the table, twitched. She opened her mouth. "I am not finished," I said. "Second, I am 17 years old. I get the acceptance letter to Bay Ridge Tech. It's the proudest moment of my life. I bring it to you. Dad, and you don't look up from your bills. You call it impractical. Mom, you call me selfish for wanting to go. Because the travel costs would interfere with Celeste's tuition. You tell me if I'm going to be that selfish. I have to pay for it myself, so I did." I looked at Martin. His face was granite. "Third," I said, "it's 2 years ago. I am sitting in my car. I have just signed a 9-figure deal, selling the company I built from nothing, the company I funded by cleaning classrooms. I call you to tell you the one piece of news I think you might finally be proud of. And you, Mom, you are busy. You are busy picking out paint swatches for Celeste's nursery. And you, Dad, you tell me how proud you are. That Celeste made partner track. You never, not once, asked me about the sale again." The silence that followed was absolute. Celeste was openly crying, silent tears running down her face, dripping onto the oak table. Elaine was looking at her hands. Martin was staring at the chicken on his plate, his jaw working. "Talia," Martin said, his voice a low growl. I thought you were the strong one. I thought you got it. You didn't need all that coddling. You were independent. You were fine." There it was, the word from the tape, the cage. "Strong doesn't mean unfeeling." "Dad," I said. The words were quiet, but they landed like stones. "It just means I learned to stop asking for what you were never going to give. Strong was just your excuse for not having to see me." "That's not—" he began. "Stop," I said. "I have one more thing for you to listen to." I stood up and went to the counter. I brought back the small, portable cassette player. I placed it in the center of the table, next to the candle. "What is that?" Elaine said, her voice a reedy whisper. A toy?" "It's from Grandfather William," I said. My father's head snapped up. "Grandma Ruth gave it to me," I said. "Along with his letter, the one about the mandate." Martin's face went pale. I'm not going to play the tape of me at 14. Mom, begging for a bracelet. I'm going to play the tape of him, from 1996, explaining why he set up the trust you've been draining. I pressed play. The hiss filled the room. Then, my grandfather's voice, rough and clear, filled the small space. He thinks the table is for showing off. He thinks it's for presentation. He's forgotten that the table is for salvation. It is your duty to add a leaf. It is your job to find another chair. I pressed stop. The three of them stared at the machine. Elaine's hand was trembling. It wasn't a twitch. It was a violent, uncontrollable shake. She tried to pick up her glass of water and couldn't. I, she stammered. It all just got so complicated. All those people, Nora and her drama, Ray and his neediness. It was too much. Her voice cracked, and she was, for the first time, not performing. She was terrified. I wanted something simple, something I could control. Control. There it was. Not love, not family, control. And you, Celeste? I asked, turning to my sister. She flinched. What's your excuse? The butt dial was very clear. Let her have her little drama. Cringe. Was that you? Or was that Mom's script? Celeste looked from my face to my mother's. She looked trapped. Mom did call people, she whispered, looking at her lap. She told me to just let it go, to let you have your moment. She looked up, and her eyes met mine. The star was gone. She was just a tired, scared woman. But I knew it was wrong. When I saw the picture, I knew. I should have said something to her, to you. Years ago. I'm sorry. Talia, I am so sorry. It was the first apology I had ever received from her in my entire life. I let it sit in the air for a moment. Then, I reached down to the chair beside me and picked up a manila folder. I slid it onto the center of the table, on top of the cassette player. What is that? Martin said. That, I said, is the truth. It's the bank statements for the Monroe Family Unity Trust for the last 15 years. It's the memo lines showing the payments to Elaine Monroe for Easter Fund. It's the email from Reverend Caldwell, informing me of the church's new investigation into that fund. And it's the letter from the town clerk, wondering where the community brunch money went. Elaine made a small, choking sound. I didn't do this to expose you, I said, my voice quiet. I did this to stop you. You didn't just simplify the family. You stole from it. You stole from your mother. You stole from your brother. You stole from me. And you used grandfather's trust, the one he built to unite us, to do it. Martin stared at the folder. He finally understood. This wasn't a family squabble. This was legal. This was financial. This was public. Talia, he said, his voice paper thin. What do you want? It was the first honest question he'd asked me all night. I want two things, I said, and they are not negotiable. First, the trust. You, Mom, are signing over administratorship to Mr. Parker and a third-party accountant. Effective tomorrow morning, the fund will be fully restored. From now on, it will be used exactly as grandfather intended, to pay for every family member's travel to a central Easter, no exceptions. Elaine was white-faced, but she nodded. Second, I said, the Easter tradition. You are done hosting, forever. From now on, it's either here, at Ravenvale, where my table is big enough, or it's at the community hall, run by the church, and open to the town, as it was supposed to be. The days of the simple, exclusive, the country club brunch are over. The others are now the only list. I looked at all three of them. They were broken. The performance was over. The stage was bare. The lights were on. There were no more arguments. There were no more defenses. Martin looked at Elaine. Elaine looked at Celeste. Celeste looked at me. And in the silence of the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of chicken and lemon. They all, one by one, nodded. There were no hugs. There was no applause. There was no cinematic moment of forgiveness. It was just an agreement, a treaty signed in the rubble. I stood up. You can finish your dinner, or you can go. I'm done. I turned and walked away from the table, toward the big glass doors that opened onto the vineyard. I left them there, in the small, bright circle of candlelight, with the folder of evidence sitting between them. I slid the glass door open, and the cold night air hit my face. I stood there, listening to the sound of the wind in the vines. I heard their chairs scrape back. I heard their quiet, retreating footsteps. I heard the front door open, and then close, softly. I heard their car start, and the crunch of the gravel as it drove away. I was alone again, in my house, but the cold, tight knot in my chest was gone. I turned back to the room. I looked at the table. The plates were barely touched. From now on, I said, to the empty room, this table is always open. I blew out the candle. But it's not for anyone who wants to close the door on someone else. The 4 plates sat on the small oak table all night. I left them there. A silent testament. I slept in the guest room, not my own, and woke up to a house that felt scrubbed clean, like the air after a violent storm. I made coffee, my hands steady. The dread was gone. The anger was gone. What was left was a vast, quiet emptiness. The phone, charging on the counter, was no longer a weapon. It was just a phone. It rang at 9 a.m. I looked at the screen. Pastor Caldwell. I picked it up. Talia. His voice was not smooth. It was clipped, professional, and had the metallic taste of fear. I wanted to inform you that, after an emergency board meeting this morning, the church has taken several steps. First, we are conducting a full independent audit of the Community Easter Fund, going back 10 years. Second, we will be making a full restitution of any and all misallocated funds. He paused, clearly waiting for a response. I gave him none. Third, he continued, we have accepted your mother's resignation from all committee positions. And fourth, we would like to formally apologize to you and to the others, as they were called. We, as a church, relied on tradition when we should have been asking who was being left by the roadside. Next year, we will be hosting an Easter community table, open to all. We would be honored if you would help us plan it. Thank you, Reverend, I said. I'm sure the community will appreciate that. I hung up. My phone buzzed immediately, a text message from Martin. It was not an apology. It was not emotional. It was a ledger sheet, a final accounting. Submitted full transparency report, all bank statements, and my letter of resignation as fund cosigner to the church board at 8 a.m. Mr. Parker has received my signature authorizing the complete transfer of trust administration. He will be in touch with you and Ruth. It was the most honest, direct communication I had ever received from him. A statement of facts, an action completed. And then, the call I was waiting for. Elaine. I let it ring 3 times. I answered. I said nothing. I heard her breathing. It was a terrible sound. A ragged, wet, collapsed sound. This wasn't the performer. This wasn't the strategist. This was the wreckage. Talia, she whispered. I'm here. Martin. He told them everything. He told me everything. The will. The numbers. The fraud. She choked on the word. All I wanted, all I ever wanted, was a perfect family, I finished for her. I know. It's all gone, she whispered. The church, my friends, Martin, he won't even look at me. I waited. The old Talia, the strong one, would have jumped in, would have said, It's okay, Mom, we'll fix it. I was not that Talia. Talia, she said, her voice the smallest I had ever heard it. I don't know, how do I, how do we start over? It was the first real question she had ever asked me. I looked out the glass doors. The morning sun was hitting the pergola. The long 12-foot walnut table was sitting there. It was empty from the party, washed clean by the morning dew. It was strong, and it was waiting. I didn't answer her. I ended the call. I walked outside, onto the damp grass. I stood at the head of the table. I took a single photograph with my phone. The long, empty waiting expanse of it. The lines of the vines stretching out behind it. The sun hitting the grain of the wood. I opened my text messages. I selected a lane. I attached the photo. And I wrote the only answer there was. You start by adding chairs. My phone buzzed. It was the Ravenvale Easter group chat. A new message had appeared. It was from Celeste. Eli or Nora must have added her. It was addressed to everyone. I am writing this because I have been silent for 30 years. I watched my mother build a world that revolved around me, and I knew it was at the expense of my sister, and at the expense of many of you. I benefited from that, and I never questioned it. I called it family, but it was just easy, and it was cruel. The butt dial Talia heard, that was me, parroting what I'd been taught. There is no excuse for it. My silence was a choice, and it was wrong. I am so sorry. To all of you, but especially to you. Talia. I stared at the words. Aunt Nora replied first. Well, it's about damn time. Welcome to the messy table, Celeste. Uncle Ray added, what Nora said, we've been saving you a seat. Then Nora, always the pragmatist, wrote again. This can't be a one-time thing. That brunch was the first time I felt like a Monroe in 20 years. I propose a family open brunch. Once a quarter. We rotate houses. Mine's too small. So I'll just bring the wine to Eli's. We keep the table open. No more simple lists. Ever. I was smiling at my phone when a car pulled up. Eli's old sedan. Grandma Ruth got out. She wasn't using her walker. She was carrying a small, muddy garden trowel. She walked right up to me, her eyes sparkling. Well, she said, her voice full of mischief, I believe you have something I've been waiting 30 years for. I smiled. I knew. We walked together, side by side, to the edge of the vineyard, to the youngest vine, the one I had planted myself, the one I had christened with a secret. I knelt in the soft, dark earth. I dug my hands in, right where I remembered. My fingers brushed against the smooth wooden shell. I pulled it out, the golden egg, caked in mud. I polished it on my jeans and handed it to her. She held it in her palm, this thing from the past, unearthed. With a twist, she opened it. The small, rolled scroll was still inside. The paper was damp and fragile, but the ink I had written in was permanent. What does it say, Grandma? Eli asked, coming up behind us. She unrolled the small, precious piece of paper. She held it up to the sun. She read the words aloud, her voice clear and strong, a proclamation over the valley. Truth seats everyone. Damn right it does, Eli murmured. And as if summoned by the words, my phone rang. A number I didn't know, a local prefix. I was done avoiding the world. I answered. This is Talia. Ms. Monroe? My name is Maria Sanchez. I run a scholarship fund for at-risk youth here in Napa. I'm so sorry to bother you. I know this is a wild question. Her voice was fast and nervous. She told me the story of my brunch was all over town. She told me about the miracle table everyone was talking about. And we have these kids, Ms. Monroe, 15 of them, good kids, from hard places. They don't have good tables. They're falling through the cracks. We try to teach them skills. And I heard about your brick oven, Margaret, the caterer. She's a friend. And I heard about your cousin, Eli, and his guitar. What's the question, Maria? I asked, a smile spreading across my face. I knew the answer already. I was wondering, would you ever consider letting them come to Ravenvale? Just to have a place? Margaret, she She volunteered to teach them to bake in that oven, and I thought, maybe Eli, maybe they could have guitar lessons under that big purple flowered tree. She took a huge breath. We have no money. I can't pay you. It's an imposition, but I had to ask. They just need a place to be seen. I looked at my grandmother, who was holding her tiny scroll. I looked at Eli, leaning against a vine. I looked at the long, empty waiting table. It is your duty to add a leaf. Maria, I said, my voice thick. My table is always open. When do they start? I hung up the phone. Eli was grinning. Guitar lessons for a bunch of teenagers? Yeah, I can do that. I'll need pizza. We can do that, I laughed. Grandma Ruth simply tucked the scroll into her pocket. Your grandfather would have liked that, she said. He always said the table was for salvation. I stood there, looking at my home. The calls of accusation had become calls of contrition. The calls of contrition had become calls for community. My grandfather's mandate was complete. The table was no longer about family. It was about belonging. The camera of my mind pulled back. I saw the whole vineyard, the rolling green hills under the bright, forgiving sun. I saw the long, dark walnut table, solid and permanent. It was not an instrument of revenge. It was an invitation. I saw the mismatched chairs, and I saw, in my mind's eye, more chairs being added, folding chairs, stools, new ones, for kids with guitars, for bakers, for whoever needed a seat. My phone was in my hand. It was silent. For 30 years, it had been a symbol of my exclusion, my isolation, a screen that delivered rejection in 6 cold words, a tool for my work, a weapon for my defense. I looked at it. Then I walked to the center of the long walnut table. I pressed the button on the side, silencing the ringer. The screen went black. I placed the phone, face down, in the very center of the table. Truth, finally, had taken its seat. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.